Ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, the Fuzz is here, and it's time for another Spellweaver talk. Now, today I want to talk about something that's been popping up here and there, but has basically become kind of like a general consensus, and that is the fact that wisdom, as an aspect, is considered to be somewhat overpowered, due to the fact that it is basically part of just about every control deck, and it seems to be splashable into everything. So I've been thinking about that, trying to figure out why is that. So let's take a minute to think about what does every aspect have that sets it apart from each other, right? So let's start with order. Order is the one aspect that has all the life gain, or most of it anyways. And besides that, you've got the one super overpowered angel, the guardian of the faithful. And it is also the aspect that has its own unique win conditions with the Triangelica and, to an extent, the life gain, although a lot of the life gain wins happen via combo decks. But life gain and the angels are basically what order has. Not a whole lot, it's a bit of a one-dimensional aspect. But let's move on. What about nature? Well, nature has a lot of really fast creatures. I'll just start opening up these as I go. A lot of really fast creatures, a lot of elves, and then you've got basically sole ownership of bouncing stuff. So you've got Tornado Outbreak, Storm Fairy, Landslide, and all these other cards that just bounce creatures back to hand or back to the deck. And only nature can do this. So that is nature's gimmick. It is also one of the only aspects that can destroy spells with the unicorn, and it has just a lot of really fast, swift creatures. So that's what nature is all about. Now what about rage? Rage is all about the aggression and burn. It has the most efficient aggressive lineup because of it has not one but two creatures that do 2 damage at cost just 1 mana. It also has access to very efficient removal such as Fireball, Word of Fire, and Dragonfire if you need, super big removal. But it also has access to some late game creatures as well. You have the Mescation Phoenix for a strong late game presence because it's hard to kill, and then even the Red Dragon for just this unstoppable force that your opponent has to answer or face destruction. So it's a fairly self-sufficient aspect that functions really well on its own. Moving on, we've got Corruption. Similar to Rage, but most of its removal is not about burn, but it's just about manipulating creatures. This aspect has the best anti-creature removal with Noxious Fumes basically being a 1-mana answer to most at early game, and with Consume being just an incredibly strong board control tool. But it also has some really strong late game cards, starting from the bottom of the pole, the Undead Hydra, but then you've also got this guy that can just clean up entire boards when he gets a chance, the Succubus for big life swings, and this dude for just scaring the crap out of your opponent, right? And I guess Zierra, but she's a little bit slow in my opinion. And then Dominion has basically all the most badass removal with Cataclysm for board clears, Mr. Karthus for just all-purpose destruction of anything you don't like. You also have Drayla for locking down boards, although she doesn't seem as much play because she's a little bit slower and isn't an instant answer. In order for her to be an instant answer, you need basically something like 7 or 9 mana to where you can immediately play her, exhaust the creature, steal it, and then maybe sack it with Sell into Slavery or something. But if your opponent can't remove her, it is truly fearsome. But a lot of the cards here focus on just stealing your opponent's stuff. The Bloodbowl Matriarch plays your opponent's spells. Helm of Dominion takes your opponent's creatures. What else we got? Temptress looks at your opponent's hand, takes cards from there. But what about Wisdom? What is it that Wisdom has that makes it so good, basically? Well, Wisdom has... Well, let's start with the small stuff. It's got the energy theme. Yeah, every aspect has some energy cards, but this is the only one that actually has cards that synergize with it. Starting with a Charged Aurite, and then cards like Astral Dive. But it has some other things that make it basically a one-stop shop for all of your control needs. So the more experienced players will already know what I'm talking about, but let's talk about it anyways. So first of all, card draw. Basically almost all the card draw is in this in this aspect. You have the creatures that draw, starting with our good friend, the Disquisitive Spirit, and our everybody's favorite creature, the Library Guards. The creatures that immediately give you cards, well, not immediately with the Spirit, but basically replace themselves, so that playing them keeps your options open. But you also just have a card like this, just immediately draw 2 cards. Your Hero Power can also draw cards, and excuse me, and even Astral Dive draws a card. So all the card draw, almost all of it is here. Now every aspect has a word of something that draws 1 card, but a lot of those words aren't that good. They're all right for the most part, but most of the major draw is in this aspect. But that's not all. The bigger thing that this aspect offers is Ramp. New Horizons is basically the best ramp card in the game because it immediately accelerates you forward 1 turn. Now, you could argue that Dominion has that too with the Power Surge card, but Power Surge is worse than New Horizons because gaining a Mana Crystal, which is usually done via a regular shrine, also draws you a card, whereas getting an aspect doesn't. So playing a New Horizon, you're just basically accelerating yourself by 1 turn, whereas with Power Surge, you're also accelerating yourself by 1 turn, but you're losing out on one card draw or a skill shrine, one or the other. So that's why it's a little bit worse. You could even look at this card and say, well, this is also a form of ramp. You don't actually accelerate yourself by a turn, but you do get the option to ramp quicker on demand. But it's just a little bit worse than New Horizons, so it doesn't see much play. The next thing this aspect has is color fixing via this awesome little card, everybody's favorite, Obelisk of Unity, which basically lets you fix your deck in any way you want at pretty much no cost, since it replaces itself when you play it. So you've got these 3 things: card draw, ramp, and mana fixing, which is basically what every control deck would like to see. And all of those things are in one aspect, which is a little bit strange. If you compare this to Magic the Gathering, the card draw is for the most part in blue, but the ramping has traditionally been in green. So those 2 have been separate. So if you wanted to play, like a ramp draw deck, you needed to play those 2 aspects. Versus here, you just pick blue and then add either Dominion or Corruption or really anything. Basically anything can throw in some blue and play some Disquisitive Spirits, Library Guards, or even New Horizons if they want. So because of that, this aspect is just this all-purpose toolbox that has everything you need. And I think that's what makes it such a versatile aspect. And on top of all that, you also have access to cards like Silencer, very powerful control tool, and the Lamp of Zephyr, everybody's favorite. Although thankfully now that you're required to play 2 blue, it's not as easy to splash, but since you'll be usually starting with blue and then relying on obelisks, it's not too hard to throw it in. Oh, and one more thing. Gnome Power Engineer, the only other card besides Unicorn that serves as reliable spell removal, and it's arguably even better because you can actually use the energy and put it on something else. Put it on your Foundry Engineer for more golems. Put it on Chalice of Yunks for extra life. So all these things combined just make this pretty much all-purpose everything. So what I was thinking is, how about we take New Horizons and put it to a different aspect, right? Because I don't think ramp and draw should be in the same one. So what would be the funniest aspect to throw this into? I was actually thinking Order. Order already has a form of that, of ramp, via the Angel Blessed Knight. But unfortunately, the Angel Blessed Knight is not very reliable because it can just be killed. But this doesn't fail. You can just play it, get your shrine out, and everything is good. Or just give it to anything else and see what happens. You separate these 2, and maybe it'll be a little bit more difficult. But another thing, the Obelisk of Unity is a card that's attracted a lot of attention. I've already talked about this before, but I've actually only recently thought of a rather amusing way to fix this card. First of all, what I don't know is, have the developers considered making some cards, I guess you could say, aspect-less? It would be like the equivalent of a colorless card in Magic. Basically a card that you can play with any combination of aspects. And if you did that, Obelisk of Unity would be the perfect candidate for that card. Because it seems like exactly the kind of thing everybody should have access to. Hey, it's Obelisk of Unity, right? We unite together or something. No. Of course, if we just did that, it would make the card even more ridiculous. So, here is my proposed solution for the Obelisk of Unity. It would become aspectless, or make up some other word for it. It would become legendary, so that you can only have one on the board. It still draws you a card, that's fine. And rather than one of your wisdom levels becomes something else, you can just say one of your anything becomes something else. So it would be a buff to the card. But because it is legendary, you can't just have 3 of these on the board and do shenanigans. And furthermore, since it is legendary, any other obelisks you have, you will either have to get rid of via Divine Offering, or hold just in case your opponent decides to destroy them with Unicorn. If you only just run one, I mean, and it gets destroyed, well, then you lose it. I think this would make rainbow decks a little bit more interesting, since you wouldn't have to start with blue. You could start with anything. You could just pick any 3 aspects, run a bunch of Obelisks of Unity, and there you go. Now, how feasible this is, would it be broken, ridiculous? I don't know, but I'm all about experimentation. I'm all about starting up something crazy, shaking up the meta a little bit. So that's all I wanted to say on the subject of the wisdom aspect and why it is so good. It's just because it has access to such all-purpose cards. I mean, hell, you could look at something like library cards, and what deck would this card not be good in? I mean, the body itself is reasonable for the cost, and you get a card. So that's just always good. So it being part of an already good in everything aspect just makes it more good in everything. Kind of repeating myself here, but you get the idea. So anyways, those are my 2 cents. Do let me know what you think. I do want to start up a bigger discussion regarding this, especially about Obelisk of Unity and also Divine Offering, which is something I'm going to come back to in a later video, because those seem to be the central focal points of the discussions on forums, because those are central mechanics of the game. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe, like, the whole 9 yards, and let's keep it alive. Let's see if we can make Spellweaver the best freaking game that it can be. Thanks for watching, and see you guys out on the battlefield.